Hi, Magenta Otter back in the kitchen, this time to show you my whole wheat bread recipe. And I say my, but actually I got the recipe from my friend Kara, and she got it from her dad Carl. But it's an awesome recipe because even though it's really healthy whole wheat bread, it is so soft and delicious that it's really the only bread we want to eat in our household. So I make it all the time and have pretty much stopped buying store-bought bread because we love this bread so much.
Here is a rundown of the equipment and ingredients needed to make this bread recipe. First, you need a really good bread mixer with a dough hook, and in my experience, nothing beats a Bosch. I have used KitchenAid professional mixers, but in the end, they just can't stand up to years of bread making like a Bosch can. The ingredients include flaxseed. This is just bulk flaxseed that I have ground myself in my Blendtec for a few seconds. Whole wheat flour that I have also ground myself in my kitchen mill using white wheat, which I find makes the absolute best bread. I keep both the whole wheat and the flaxseed in the refrigerator once I have ground them to maintain their nutrients. And here are two things that I keep in the freezer: gluten and SAF instant yeast, regular white flour, potato flakes, non-fat dry milk, regular table salt, 2 tablespoons of regular butter, honey. This is actually the most expensive ingredient, so try to buy a larger container just to be economical. Regular apple cider vinegar. Okay, so now let's start making the bread. The first thing we do is take really warm water, very warm but not so hot you can't touch it. Total of 2.5 cups. Then we have 2 tablespoons of our SAF instant yeast. Then we need to add a 1/2 cup of honey so that the yeast has some sugar to eat. And you definitely want to spray your measuring cup with cooking spray before you put that honey in, because then it helps the honey just slide out. Isn't it awesome I have a magenta measuring cup? Turn this on for just a minute to incorporate. Give a chance for the yeast to start activating and bubbling and munching on the honey. As Alton Brown would say, give a chance for all the little yeasties to start burping and farting and making bubbles. While I was getting the other ingredients ready, the yeast has had a chance to bubble. Even though with instant yeast, we don't actually have to wait. It's fine if you just put everything together without waiting. So I've washed out my 1/2 cup measuring cup after the honey, and I'm adding 1/2 cup of the flax, a 1/2 cup of the gluten, and 2 of the 4 cups of wheat flour that I'm going to put in. I'll turn on the mixer for a little bit to incorporate that. Then we'll put in our other dry and wet ingredients, like 4 tablespoons of non-fat dry milk, 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar, 2 teaspoons of salt, 2 tablespoons of melted butter. Now we'll put in the remaining 2 cups of wheat flour. Note that if you are not using white flour, but you're only using wheat flour, you'll be putting in at least 5 cups. And then we will mix for a bit to incorporate. Now this is where the art and science of bread making really comes into play, because you're going to put in about 1.5 cups more flour. At this point, I put in white flour just because I like to use a mix of white and wheat. But the exact amount you need really depends upon several factors, as is always the case with bread making. You see that the bread is pulling away from the sides of the bowl and forming into one ball, but it still has a way to go to really be a nice smooth ball. So we're going to set the Bosch mixer on 2 and knead it for about 4 more minutes. After the kneading time is over, we feel the dough. This dough is still really sticky, So we know we need to add some more flour. You want the dough to be tacky, but not super sticky so that it sticks all over your fingers. Still a little too sticky, so just add a little more flour. Once we get toward the end, we start adding it just a couple tablespoons at a time. Now we'll test it again. Yeah, this is feeling good. It's not super sticky, but still tacky. And now that we know it has enough flour in it, we want to see if it's kneaded long enough by checking for the window pane test. Can you take a little ball of dough and stretch it out so it's really thin? Yes, look at that gluten doing its job. This looks great. Before we finish putting in the last little bit of flour, I recommend getting a big bowl and spraying it with cooking spray. This is my tip because if you've met me, I'm a germaphobe and I don't like cleaning up things. So rather than doing what the original recipe said, which is to take your ball of bread dough and put it out on the counter and roll it out with a rolling pin, which requires me getting a large chunk of countertop clean enough for me to feel comfortable rolling bread dough on it, I opted for just using a really big bowl, which I can get really clean, and then I just put in cooking spray. This allows me to let the dough rise in here, and then when it's time to punch it down, punch it down. And we have a nice, smooth, beautiful ball of bread dough. Now we take our nice, smooth, beautiful ball of bread dough, put it in our oiled bowl, and cover it either with a dish towel, or I like to use plastic wrap so that I can see how the rise is progressing. All right, we can see that the bread has risen a lot. It's ready to be punched down. So you get to take out all of your frustrations on anything by punching down the dough. Then we roll into a big log. And if you're really precise, you can get a food scale to make sure that you are breaking the loaf in a place that makes it exactly 2 even halves, 2 loaves, but I just approximate. Now these loaves can rise for the second rise. The loaves have risen to a level where they are nice and puffy, a good 1.5 to 2 inches above the rim of the bread pan. So they are ready to go in the oven. Ooh, those are some beautiful loaves of bread. I'm going to take them out and tint them with the foil. With these cute little foil tints, the bread will still get brown on top, just not overly brown. And here are a couple beautiful loaves of freshly baked bread. In my oven, they cook at 375 for about 14 minutes without the foil tints, and then about 11 minutes after, but you really need to calibrate that to your own oven. Honestly, any really good electric knife is fine, but bread boxes, they're really hard to find a great one. So I'm going to provide a link in the description below of this bread box. It took me 2 years to find the perfectly sized bread box at the Container Store, and I definitely want you guys to have access to this. Here we are with our freshly baked bread. Again, the electric knife allows us to cut nice, thin, even slices. You can tell with the way the bread is falling over, that means it's really soft. And that's why we love this particular recipe for whole wheat bread so much, is that the bubbles are all small and even. The bread's really, really soft, and that's because of the crazy ingredients like the potato flakes and the vinegar and the gluten and the milk. All those strange extra ingredients just make this the softest, tastiest whole wheat bread. A slice of bread, hot from the oven, with butter and honey drizzled on top. There's literally nothing better in the world to eat.